Good evening. Welcome to Pain to Power. My name is Maria Cosme, also known as Brown Girl Interrupting. And we are here every Sunday talking about taking our pain, turning it into power, and leading with love. And we usually are talking about that power aspect, but I want to lean into the idea of leading today because it's really been on my mind, and the idea that we're only led when we are safe and can trust the people around us to lead us in the right direction. And so leading with love really is about being someone who builds relationships, who creates trust, who has the conditions for us to be able to recognize that they know and understand us to be able to guide us to our strength and power. So I am super excited tonight to be able to introduce to you one of the leaders that has been a pivotal person in my life in a lot of the journey that I've been on in the last 7 years in particular. And I have had a lot of leaders that have been amazing, but this man, Dr. Troy Boddy, whom I'm about to bring to the stage, has truly made an impact on me in a way that I don't even know if he realizes sometimes. Dr. Troy Boddy is the president of the East Coast Racial Equity Group, and he's also the co-director of the Sandy Springs Slave Museum, as well as just a dynamic visionary whom I am so grateful to know. So welcome, Troy.
Hey, Maria. Good evening.
Evening. I am really happy to have you here today. This is really and honestly a true treat and a full circle moment. I introduced you saying that you are one of the leaders, and we met really about, I guess it was really maybe 8 years ago, because first we taught a class together.
Yep.
I got to give a shout out to two women who made sure that I got to be in the same course as you, so you could get to know me and see me. And then but then you hired me for this position, which I've been in now as a equity instructional specialist. But I don't know if you realize the story behind how much impact you've made on me coming to this place where I am now leading with love in Pain to Power, right?
Find your paychecks every 2 weeks. Yeah, I mean.
that helped. That always helps, right? But honestly, it was a phone call that you gave me. I was 6 years ago, almost exactly 6 years ago. You called me up when we were in the process of a big reorganization. And I was really nervous because I was about to potentially have to reapply for a position that I did not feel confident in. And your phone call was like the saving grace, because you told me my job was safe. Based on some board decisions, my job was safe, and I came by a little hair of one of the 3 people that got to stay in the Equity Initiatives unit. But it was for me a catalyst, because it was the thing that was going to then let me know I was going to be okay. And it really did lead me to then decide that I was ready to separate from my husband. And so, yeah, I got the phone call, and then I went downstairs and I said, my job is safe and I'm done with the marriage. And that was it. That was my start to the Pain to Power journey. But I have to say, like, you seeing a lot in me has been a lot of where I am today. And I wanted to share one more piece. And I know we got to talk about you and so many things. But I don't know if you remember, you gave me this letter. You gave me this card.
I remember the card. I don't know what I put in it.
This was 6 years ago, and this was your message to me. Maria, I have enjoyed watching you grow into your own. In time, you will realize your power.
Wow.
Full circle. Full, absolute circle. Because that's who you are. You always see things in others as a leader. And I mean, that's why I wanted you on the show today, right? Like, I really want love for others to understand the power of who you are, what you've experienced, what you know, and where you are today. So thank you so much again, Troy. I know I took a little time, more time than I usually do, but I'm going to give the floor to you. And I'd love for you just to introduce a little bit about who you are, what you do right now. And then, yeah, let's get into it.
Okay. Well, I'm Troy Boddy. And currently I'm doing a lot of different things. I retired 2 years ago, a little over like 2.5 years ago. And it has been the opportunity to kind of do all the things I never had time to do. Like I cleaned my house, I got rid of old stuff. And then once I got through all of that, it's like, okay, so what's next? So I had been working with the museum, and actually I was co-directing while I was still working. And so that continued to build out the museum and really get it up and going and making sure that people knew about it. And that's been really fun because I have no background in museums. But as a kid, one of my dreams jobs was to be the person who did the dioramas in museums.
Oh, really? That's
So yeah,
yeah.
I'm that kid that would go to the museum and I'd come back home. I remember we went to the National History Museum one year, and I came back home and I got all these newspapers and staplers and paint, and I replicated the displays of the animals and the dinosaurs and things at the National History Museum
That's
in
so
my
cool.
bedroom.
Ah,
So made a mess, got paint on the carpet, and I know I got in a little bit of trouble, but I think my parents appreciated my creativity and encouraged it. But so it's kind of cool. All these years later, I get to do that at the Sandy Springs Slave Museum and African Art Gallery. I also started upon the before I retired, 3 years before I retired, I started a doctoral program. And one of the last assignments we had to do is like, well, once you get your degree, what are you going to do next? So I knew I was going to retire. So that was one of the things. And people were like, why'd you get your doctorate? Because I always wanted to. One of the things I went to Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. And again, going back to learning and love. When I was a third grader at Stonegate Elementary, we watched a film strip on Dr. Martin Luther King, who went to Morehouse when he was 16, and he was one of my civil rights heroes. So it was in third grade I decided I was going to go to Morehouse. And years later, I actually, got to attend that institution. And one of the things at Morehouse they talk about is Morehouse puts a crown above your head and you have to grow into it. And they definitely gave you expectations to go on, continue your education beyond just getting your bachelor's, but getting your master's, getting your PhD, and going back and doing things in the community. So I get to do that at the museum. And I also get to give back because I get to continue the work that I started in Montgomery County as the director of equity initiatives for 11 years. So, and I think in that job, I think I was probably one of the longest running people in that position because we were early adopters. So I had to figure it out as I went along
mm-hmm.
because nobody else was really doing it like we were. And so that was a great privilege and an honor. And I learned so much from that into how organizations and school systems can really do this work in ways that are real, that's not just flavor of the month, but can leave a lasting impact if people actually commit to and are serious about educating everybody's children. So that's just a little bit about me. And then I do a couple other things. I do a little art. I just wrote a book, which comes out February 2nd. And I'm working on a children's book with a cousin of mine. So I'm excited about that project too. So I get to do all the things I never had time to when you work a 9 to 5 or longer.
Well, you're certainly not taking a break during retirement, but you're enjoying yourself. And I love it because you talked about so many pieces of just how your dreams have really come true. Like you have made so many pieces of what you hope to be able to do as a kid into your future, which is amazing. I have to say a shout out to a lot of our Renters Union family in here. You got some folks really cheering you on here. I saw Tasha from No Holdbacks. She shared some thoughts, and Advis from Random Thoughts. Welcome. And so, Troy,
Yes.
a lot of these things, we're going to talk about a lot of these projects because they
Mhm.
all have, have taken you in different places and brought you to different places in this journey. But first, I always want to know and understand. Thank you, Ja. And Phil Montague says, congratulations.
Thank
So, how would you define this idea of taking pain and turning it into power?
So for me, when you at first asked me, I was like, what am I going to talk about? What's pain to power? But then it hit me. It's like, life is pain. The struggles we go through um, is the pain, but you can't have power without pain, because that's what we do all our learning
Mhm.
as educators. We can't, you know, our kids are going to fail. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to, do things that we may not want them to do. But that's part of that pain. I don't have my own kids, but I can imagine it's watching your kids do things that aren't going to have the best end results, or they're taking the hardest road path they can find. But that's part of letting them go and letting them find themselves. So that idea of pain is, I think about family members and friends who have passed, but who taught me so many things that empowered me. Um, like my mom, I remember, it's so crazy, like the things you remember, but I remember my mom was potty training me, and we'd have these deep conversations. But she was the one who kind of planted the seed that, because I asked her, she might have been watching me up, so I must have been I think I was a little bit older, but we were just having our nightly conversation. It's like, can I be a doctor? And she's like, you can be anything you want to be. You're just gonna, you're gonna have to work hard. May not always succeed, but if you want it, you can do it. And so in my dedication, there's a little section dedicated to her because she planted that seed first. Uh,
Mhm.
and so while it's painful not to have her here, the gifts that she gave me keep going. And the same with my father. Um, as an educator, I had no desire to be an educator. I was going to be a psychologist. And at some point, when I was in Morehouse, we had to do a child psychology class. And we went to a school in downtown Atlanta, just out of sight of like the big skyscrapers and things. It was so interesting. I really loved the experience. I'd always been a camp director and counselor. So I worked with kids, but I never wanted to be a teacher because I didn't, of course, as any kid, I don't want to do what my parents did. So that wasn't even on the table, but that experience kind of showed me a couple things. These kids were just outside of downtown Atlanta, Black Mecca, the bustling city in the South. And I had a picture of the skyline for some lesson I was doing. And my assumption was that they would recognize it as being Atlanta. And most of the kids did not realize this was just a couple miles away from their school. In
Mhm.
fact, you could see it out of their classroom window. And I just thought that just really made me think about exposure, um, having access and opportunity. And when I graduated from Morehouse, it took me a while to find a job, and I found a job at a halfway home for boys who were their next step was juvenile detention, and for some of them it was going to be jail. Most of them did not couldn't read at a third grade level. I was a counselor there recreational therapist was my title. And I noticed, I'm like, these kids can't read. There was one who was really smart. He took AP classes. He was brilliant. He had so much potential, but he just got caught up. Um, and finally he got out, he met all the requirements, went back, and several weeks later we heard that he'd been killed. Um, but that experience really made me think seriously about education. And and maybe I was like, I don't know if it's too late for these guys, but what if I was able to help kids at the elementary school age to help make that better so they don't get to this place. So an opportunity arrived for me to go to University of Bridgeport. They had the first internship program in the country. So it was free. So I like that. My dad liked that because he's like, I just paid for your undergrad. I don't know about, like, I don't know. But I was like,
Right.
it's free. So he was like, okay, go ahead. And they paid you a little stipend, and me and one of my Morehouse brothers went um, and got a master's in education, and then I just kind of moved and grooved since then. But that just those were some of the early experiences that really
Mhm.
kind of set the stage for me as an educator.
But I think I love how you connected all these pieces together, though, right? Like that this idea that pain is life, life is pain, right? Like that's for sure. But I think it is finding where then do you have the power to change that, whether it's for yourself and your mission to change things for yourself, or it's for others. And it sounds like a lot of it was for others around in your path.
Right.
I want to back it up though, because you talked about your father being an educator, but you have been steeped in, even though it wasn't your path, right? Like, but you've been steeped in the history of education, particularly in one of the largest districts in the entire nation, Montgomery County Public Schools, for a really long time. Take us back a little bit into just the legacy and the history of you in the school system in which you also grew up in.
Hmm. So my neighborhood um, was all Black, middle class, and working class people, a lot of educators. Just about the majority of my neighbors and the people who lived around us were educators. And they all worked together too. Um, so they all knew each other. They went to the same churches. So it was like community on top of community on top of community. And everybody was cousins or related by marriage of sort. It's a little town. And and so Sandy Spring has an interesting history. It's the oldest free Black community in Montgomery County. It was incorporated in 1728 by the Quakers. What most people don't understand is that Quakers, they were enslavers until about the time of the Revolutionary War, when they decided that it kind of, keeping other people in bondage kind of went against their religion and those kind
Mhm.
of things. So in Sandy Spring, they, over a period of 20, 30 years, they began to free their enslaved people. My ancestors, my mother's side of the family, were some of those people. So we can trace our roots in Montgomery County back for many generations.
Mhm.
So at the time, though, Montgomery County, as diverse as it is now, they did not build schools for African Americans. And so communities built their own schools. So when I hear this foolishness about, oh, Black people don't care about education, that is not historically accurate, and it's still not fact. So in Sandy Spring, they built a school. They had several schools. The Sharp Street Industrial was the first school, and I believe it was the first school for Blacks in the county. And then eventually Sandy Spring Elementary, where my dad was the first Black principal recruited by the county to be a principal. And actually, he started off as a teacher principal. And so he has there's a lot at the museum. This is how my life just kind of connects. The museum, there's a room we call the achievement room, which I didn't know when I first started, but these were the desks, the wood stove, and chalkboards from the original Sandy Springs School, where my dad was the teacher principal.
Yeah. Wow.
It was really, it was just
That's
powerful. I
powerful.
was like, I didn't know that. And I could see that wood stove because he would tell us about how, kids had to bring wood to the, school, and to keep the classroom warm. He'd talk about how cold it was. My mom went to segregated schools, my mom and all my aunts and uncles. Um, and they just talked about, they would always tell these stories about the books, the hand-me-down books, but they always talked about their teachers. Like, these people walked on water um, for them and really created opportunities, pressed them. My older brother, my dad used to talk about him teaching this guy in the neighborhood how to read. He's like, he didn't want to read regular traditional books, so he taught him how to read with comic books. And just not long ago, my older brother said, yeah, that's how he taught me how to read too.
That's
Uh,
cool.
so they did what it took. They made sure kids had pride in themselves, that they were pushed, challenged, loved, cared for, disciplined when they needed to be. And so those were my early learnings about what a good educator should be. Uh,
Hmm.
I started reading Bettina Love's new book, and she describes two of her teachers when she left the Catholic school and went to a public school in Rochester, and she described her teachers in the same way. And so these folks were the heart of the community. They were they were rock stars. And to this day, people come up to me and tell me stories about my father, which is really cool because um, it just kind of reinforces
Yeah.
the legacy,
Yeah.
how many lives he touched during his long career as an educator. And then he retired and started a whole nother career as a director for Montgomery County Department of Recreation. So then he touched the next generation, these folks
Mm.
that he taught grandkids and great grandkids. And so um, there are these, these people that, it tells you the power of education. And while these kids that went to these segregated schools, nobody cared about them. They weren't putting any money at them. They weren't paying the teachers anything. They got like half of what white teachers did during that time, but yet they produced great leaders and educators. In fact, one of my bosses, Betty Collins, was
Betty Collins.
dad's students. So, and she talks about my dad like he just walked on water and did cartwheels, you know. But that was what educators looked like then.
I love though how you shared this counter narrative, right? Like the storytelling and the way that you make it clear that I think oftentimes we focus, and the focus is always on the narrative of unfair in terms of the quality of books and materials, and definitely there, segregated schools had there was not an equal uh, distribution of resources for certain,
But
right? And accessibility. But
no gap either.
but there was no gap. But that's the key. I think that's the counter narrative, is that when we focus on that, we miss the fact that but there was amazing teaching. There
Mhm.
was community, and going back to the idea of leaders who lead with love.
Right.
Every person, right? Like everyone you described, and every story I've ever heard from you is about this idea of teachers who lead with love, who push students but
Right.
also love them like they were their own. And
Right.
that is something that's missing, because oftentimes we are in the education system right now, we are looking to welcome to us, Jackson. We are always thinking that it's our students that are not coming prepared, when in fact it is, or our parents that are not preparing our students, but rather what you're talking about is our system and our structure is not made and developed for all of our students.
No.
Because when they are in communities and in school systems and in structures where they thrive, they are thriving, right? When they have safety, when they are pushed, when they are learning at the level that and given the opportunities to do it, it is an entirely different story. And I love that because it did lead you into more than just becoming just, I mean, you're an educator, which is powerful in and of itself. There's no just, right? But your role has been so much bigger. And before we get into that, I want to know, like, what are some of those particular stories that have stuck out to you from family about how the school experience was? And also, I guess, like, how did you juxtapose that with your own school experience? Because you're a Montgomery County kid too, right? Like,
Right. So I have 9 brothers, and there are 9 of us all together. And so we spread out over different generations. So my older siblings, they went to school. My older sister went to school all the way. It was always segregated. My next oldest siblings, they kind of transitioned from segregated schools to desegregated schools. So they had a different experience. We came along and, we started school in the 70s. So, that was, a whole different experience. So my aunt tells me this story that my aunt is brilliant in math, my mom's sister. And she used to always get A's. She didn't have to work that hard. She really is just really mathematical. And so she had this teacher who always said she cheated, or how did you know this? She was always questioned. And we know in the research, oftentimes kids of color aren't necessarily, when you do the things that they want you to do, then you're questioned whether or not you actually really did them. But she she talks about a time when they took a test and she blew it out the water. She got 100%. Nobody else did, and none of the white kids did. And basically, the teacher was told to lower her grade because they couldn't have this black girl outperforming these white kids. And then she had another story where she told me where actually, she was nominated as homecoming queen. And they, again, could not have, at that time, fathom having a black homecoming queen. So they pulled some kind of shenanigans. And, so those are just some of her experiences. She also talks about how when they were getting kids ready to go to these white schools, she was like, yeah, they would tell us, they're so much smarter than you all, they're so much further ahead, you got to be da 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 da. She's like, I got there and she was like, they didn't know as much as I did. So that was kind of interesting. In the 70s, when we were in school, they were still, like, I remember I ran for SGA in like 4th grade or something like that. And, is that because I didn't see any black kids. My dad was in PTA and those kind of things, but I didn't see any black kids in student government. So I was like, well, I'll run. I'll I'll be the black guy. So I ran, and I remember one of my friends telling me, it's like, well, you can't be vice president. There's no black presidents or vice presidents. And we looked in the encyclopedia, and of course, there were nothing but white faces. But one of the things with me is, like, if you tell me I can't, I'm gonna do everything I can. If it almost kills me, to be wrong. Right. And so I ran and I won, and I was on student government and those kind of things. So so some of the same patterns, though. I in high school, I remember every February, Black kids got to shine because we got to do the Black History displays. So that was our big, one of our big things where we were like kind of seen and in the school that one time of the year. So it was interesting. So as much as things change, they remain the same. Some of the language, some of the nastiness kind of faded away, but it wasn't. But it was, still kind of variations on the theme, but it did change and evolve over time. And then my younger brothers, they had a whole different experience than I did, and that we did. So it's kind of interesting. One day I have to sit everybody down and get their school stories.
That's gonna be the next book, Dr. Boddy.
That might be.
That's right there, right? But I think, and you said it, right? Like things never really changed. They just kind of reformed into a different level. And we see it now, right? I'm sure with your nieces and nephews and maybe even grandkids, right? Like grandnieces and nephews, right? Like and Whiskey Girl, welcome, says the same. We got a lot of friends in here today. I love it. And I think, but that's just it, right? Like I think that it comes down to, we have this idea of equity, of diversity, of allowing for everybody to have an opportunity, but we have a fear. And when I say we, the system, the structures, people that have the power to make decisions, and oftentimes when they don't look like the students in front of them, as soon as there's that possible power of and the empowerment that we want students to have, right? Yeah, yes, you can be the homecoming queen and you are a brilliant mathematician, all those things, right? And it's taken. And I think we still see that now, right? So I want to come to this idea of power. And what have you known and seen and realized about that relationship between power and the truth of really getting to racial equity?
Mm-hmm. So if we go back historically, so let's go back to Reconstruction. So enslaved people were freed. You had a bunch of poor white people. And those are the folks that had all the skills and knowledge of how to do things. The rich folks didn't really, know how to do anything. And they started coming together. And they were like, oh, no, but we can't have that, because if they come together, we lose our power. So that push forward is always met with a pushback. And we see that today with elections and the rise of a diverse population. So we move forward, and then and then President Obama really set it off. They were like, "Oh no, a Black man as president," and the potential of having Kamala Harris at some point, Black woman, be a president. Oh no, we got to do everything, pull out every trick in the book, and it's used, and the book's the same. So all the tactics we see folks using today to maintain power are the same. It's the same playbook they always use. And even when we talk about, at the museum, we talk about the Quakers, and the narrative is that they were allies, but there were a lot of people who did not like slavery, but they didn't want Black people to have what they had. And the same thing plays out today. So let's look at curriculum and AP courses and the best opportunities schools and school systems have to offer. There's always a whole lot of gatekeeping to keep some kids in and keep others out. And you see it play out every day in terms of people not wanting to share power and have everybody have that seat at the table. I remember being when I was a principal, it was like accelerated math was a big thing. And I remember I visited the school before I took over, and I went to the highest level math class they had, and it was like maybe 7 kids, 2 white kids, and 5 Asian kids. And it was a fairly big school, so I'm like, that's the class.
Right.
Note to self: when I'm in the driver's seat, we're going to talk about this. And so, people, and it's not bad people. It's just people. These are the patterns. We drink the same water and breathe the same air. And so those stereotypes and things we get absorbed into our systems. And so that was really a good conversation and a good push, because there were a lot of kids who did not have that same access.
Mm-hmm.
Those classes, they look good. Parents like to talk about it at the pool, or at the little community gatherings. Oh, my kids in math acceleration. It's like, this elementary school kids, let's calm down. Everybody will be fine. But it becomes a status symbol and a way of yielding power. Layer on that idea of critical race theory, and we talk about the tenet of whiteness as power. Our curriculum is power. And
Mm-hmm.
that's who's allowed to have access to that curriculum and who doesn't. And what kind of experiences do kids have? I remember when No Child Left Behind first came out, there were some schools that took away chorus, instrumental music, anything fun, any of the things that, like, for me as a student, those would be the things that would draw me in and got me to love learning. Those things were cut out. So it was reading and math. And where's the joy in there? How are we teaching kids to be powerful? And so I always say, you can just walk through a school building and you can tell who has the power in the building, because it's going to be who is in what class, what kind of classes. Nobody has to say anything. You can just walk through the building and see it, and our kids see it. So
They absolutely do.
they internalize their place in the world unless they have adults and other people around them that give them counter narrative. No, you can do this.
And I think our kids, all of our kids see it. So our students who are in those classes also now start to believe, because you said that internalization comes to internalize racism, but it also comes to internalize oppression, right? So then now I think that I'm always going to be on top because this is what my classes look like, and that distinction of it. And I love that you brought up this idea of how we take away the most the creative spaces for our students, not recognizing the power and how that connects them to their genius. And I have to say, I saw Whiskey Girl in here, who is one of my genius creatives, a poet extraordinaire who is a brilliant, brilliant woman who grew up in this area as well. And yes, right, like there's so many of my, artist friends in the chat right now. That's a huge thing, because what we know is that is what ignites so much of our students, truly, especially with the way schools are right now. Like that, I mean, like it really does disconnect kids. And a lot of it is they see all that and they see through a lot of that too.
Right.
So with you personally, like in this journey of everything that you have done, and you have literally been in the classroom in every level, at every position, in outside the classroom and inside, right? But what do you think really has shaped who you are as a leader?
Mm-hmm. So going back to the community I grew up in, where you and I, we were working with some kids on Friday, and we were talking about the idea of community. And I was sharing a story of when I graduated from Morehouse, how my whole family came down. And they got they got the church bus to take them to the train station. I think they filled up a whole train car, and it's so cool because we have a video of this whole event, that whole weekend. But you would have thought, I was like, I'm the one graduated, but we all graduated from Morehouse that day.
Mm-hmm.
So community to me is that love we show each other, and that, you know, you don't hate on someone, you cheer them on, you know, because if I'm successful, we all made it in our different ways. And not all of us were able to do the same things, but when one of my cousins does something, you know, we cheer it on. We are, you know, that's community to me. And even the larger community were the same way. They would cheer you on, and speak about you like you were their child. And so for me, that's that love, that's that community, that's that shared collective experience. And so for me as a leader, and starting off teaching in Langley Park, which it was a mostly immigrant community. So most of my kids came from Central America, Africa, the Caribbean, and I only had ever taught a handful of white kids. So that was my reality, and learn a big place of learning for me. So while I knew Black culture, or at least my Black culture, because there's such a continuum of it, we don't have the same experience, but we have some similar experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn about my Latino families and my students, and just kind of how they rolled, how they saw the world. And you get all this like crazy talk. Oh, they don't care about education. They just want all this craziness. And then people talking about kids like there's no schools anywhere else outside of the United States. I'm like, you know, they do have schools in other countries, you know.
Right.
And so it was, you know, so for me, those growing up where I did with all these educators that taught, you know, during segregation and transition through, and again, hearing those stories really helped me to know that, you know, just as my dad being in a little 3-room schoolhouse in Sandy Spring, this was these kids' opportunity. This is their one shot, because the rest of the world didn't care about them. No, they didn't care about these little Black kids, you know, other than what they could do to make them money, you know, to work for them and to serve them. Not that much different today, you know, in some ways. So I knew, like, in order to help their families grow, I had to take, you know, my role as an educator seriously. So for me, that meant that's where my deep cultural proficiency work started, and just dismantling those narratives that people who didn't really know the community well, or didn't even care to, because these kids didn't look like the kids from 10, 15 years ago. Their families were different. They did different things. They spoke different languages. And so getting to know that, but at their core, they wanted their kids to be educated. They wanted them to be in a classroom and in a school where they were cared for, seen, pushed, and all of those things. And so as a teacher, that was my stance. And I remember I had my first year teaching, like around about this time of year, I got a student from Pakistan. He spoke no English, and I couldn't communicate with him. We did not have the technology we had today, where I could translate and we could probably talk to each other. And so I had all these kids who were learning the language. And I, you know, my self-doubt kicked in. I remember one day I cried, grown man crying when the kids were like at PE or something. It's like, I don't know if I'm actually teaching them anything.
Oh.
But in
But
time,
that's rough, right? Because you really do want to do for all your students.
right? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe this isn't for me, 'cause I don't know if I'm teaching anybody anything. And then you get through that first year, and that same little student, I can't remember his name, but I can see his face. He was always so excited about school. He was speaking better English than I was by May, and it was a cool experience, in terms of not um, not seeing kids as a deficit, and really, teaching hard, but also believing in yourself and your power.
Mm.
And in order to remain power, like one of the questions I always ask educators is like, what are you reading? And sometimes I'm shocked that I'm like, I'm not really reading it. You got to read, that's how we get, one of the ways we get better all the time. You got to try things, experiment things, and not be afraid to fail. But that was kind of like my roots in my work, so it went back to my community and the people in it and the stories they told. And then I transferred that to my classroom. And then eventually, when I became a principal, it was the same thing. Our motto was one band, one sound. And I took it from Drumline, and we.
Right. But it's powerful, right?
But
That's what it needs to be. That's community.
right. And we're all in this together. And one of the
Yeah.
like so getting back to that, like that social justice lens that I always kind of had, like the hierarchy in a school building. So you got the principal who's supposed to be at the top, the teachers in the middle, and support services are at the bottom of this hierarchy. That sounds familiar. Where does that come from history? And
Mm.
that rubbed me the wrong way. Like, oops, there's my clock.
Just in time.
That rubbed me the wrong way, because we all have a role to play in this thing called education, and nobody's role is necessarily more important. And so that idea of one band, one sound, we're in this together. So things first, like, I would throw a big barbecue at the beginning of the year, and I'd be out there flipping burgers and stuff. And, staff from all levels were out there participating, being a part of it. So it became like, a tradition that we did at the beginning and end of the year. We would do plays every year to kind of go along with our school improvement theme or plan for the year. And so staff members would all participate in it, and it would resonate with everybody, because they saw the staff, and we were giving them messages. You could hear it all year. But that was like one of and how we talk to each other. It's like, just because I had my great aunts and uncles were all maids and chauffeurs and custodians and those kind of things. So you're not going to talk to this person who keeps our building clean any old kind of way. They don't work for you. That we work together. And so that, again, having the context in which I grew up with kind of helped set the stage for me to see how I wanted everyone to be on a level playing field. Now, we all had different roles, but we all make the school run.
But that is so deep, and I think you really layered this idea of community and how deep core values come out in our leadership actions, right? Like that idea Elena Aguilar talks about with the 3 B's, right? Our behaviors, our beliefs, and our actions are all connected together. And there is no hierarchy in community. Community really is that everyone has a role within their sphere of what they do, what they bring to the table, and everyone is contributing for the same common goal. And that's a huge and powerful way to lead. I want to just take a quick moment. There are so many people blowing up the chat, and I want to make sure we honor some of these great comments. Whiskey Girl, I love that. Mimicking supremacy and having hierarchies kills community for certain, right? And it kills the ability to thrive, because then we are fighting with each other. It is a competitiveness. It is a control and power. Right. So it's power within rather than power over.
Right.
which is so big. And I know, I think I saw Latrice Rogers in here also sharing. Yes, we all graduate. We all graduate. My family caravan to Ohio, wonderful memories. And I was in the classroom when you told the students that story. I remember I walked in and I was listening to you. It's college day, and I loved that for college day you shared that with our students. And I watched them and they were enthralled, right? They were really into your story, and I could see, and I imagine probably later as you continued to talk to them, some of that connection came out, right? That connection to family, because that is so important to all of our students.
Right.
And for many of them, that is their stories of the things that they're experiencing. They are the first in their families for a lot of things.
Right.
So that's powerful. And thank you so much again for all of the people in the chat and sharing. So with this, I got to ask, I mean, you are a Black man in the education system as a leader. What are the challenges and the pain that you've had to power through this process of really coming to where you are? And I mean, even within that, right? I mean, so what's that been like for you?
So, that's a loaded question. Let's see. My first day in the classroom, a uh, teacher who later we became really good friends, remarkably. I'm putting up my bulletin board, minding my own business, excited about getting, that I was like getting into my first year of teaching. And she walks into school, my class, busting in my classroom and sprays me with a water gun. And it took everything in me not to curse and act a fool. But she cleaned it up. She's like, "Oh, I thought you were the other Troy who was a building service worker in our building." And I was like, "That really doesn't make it any
What?
better."
Yeah, why you still spraying people with water
Right.
guns?
That still doesn't make it better, you know. So it was like, "Welcome to teaching." And I just remember those first couple of years. You know, I've always been, people who know me know there are like two sides. There is foolish, crazy Troy, creative, actually many times, but there's a creative Troy, and I'm very serious about what I do too. So I'm a combination of things. But one of the things is, like, again, I work really hard and I want to be good. I'm not I'm not competitive in that I got to be better than other people by putting them down. I just want to be the best I can be. And so I remember there was a opportunity. Um, Anybody who's education, in October, you have those little boxes for UNICEF. You go around and collect money.
Mm-hmm.
One year, I was selected by my principal to do a photo shoot because I was going to, me and my students were going to be the poster kids for that particular year, whatever the theme was. And one of my colleagues who'd been teaching maybe 5 years longer than I was, a white lady, she was like, you only got that because you're Black and male, or other opportunities, because I always typically had higher test scores for whatever reason. My kids always performed a little bit higher, but I was always questioned. And being a male, my classroom wasn't all cutesy, clean, organized, those kind of things. So my kids were loud, they were all over the place, and I was fine with it because learning should be joyful. So that throughout my career, I remember being a brand new assistant principal, and we were rolling out Baldridge, which is a school improvement process. Um, and when I was in central office, I was one of the people who led that work for the whole system. So to do it in one school, that was easy. So the staff brought in, we did our thing. They had their data boards and all this stuff that, data notebooks and all that stuff that were part of Baldridge. And this retired principal who was supposed to be my support told me that I was lying, that there's no way I could have done that in a few short months. And I was like, well, we just walked the building and I've shown you staff are doing these things. And that came out of the work this summer. My principal was like, you're going to take care of Baldridge since you know it. And I did. And she always, from that day, our relationship was just rocky.
Mm.
I know she didn't believe, she thought I was a liar. She didn't believe in me. She was always took any opportunity, no matter how small, to belittle me. And when I got promoted, because I got accelerated a year early to be a principal intern, she didn't even come to my last meeting because she didn't believe that I was ready or could do it. So those are the, you know, those are the things, oftentimes my experience as a adult Black male mirrors that from the research of Black male students.
Mm.
It's not a difference. I just know I've lived long enough to know what it is to put it in a container and to press on from it and deal with it in lots of different ways. But oftentimes it's the same thing, that suspicion that people don't see you as. I remember I had a parent come in. They must not have seen any newsletters. They must not have ever come to anything in the school, because I'd stopped them in the hall. They had just walked in. This was before all the days of security. And I was like, "Sir, where are you going?" Um, I'm looking for my kids. I'm like, "Oh, really? Did you go to the office?" "No." "Well, the policy is you got to go by the office." And so he goes back and forth. He shows me pictures of he and the kids in Disney World. And he's like, I pay insurance on them. And there was a custody thing. And I was like,
Mm.
"Sir, you can't just walk in the school building and go to a class and search classrooms till you find your kids. You need to go to the office." So he was like, "Who, I want to talk to the principal." I'm like, "Okay." So we walked to the office and I turned around. I was like, "Hello, I'm Mr. Boddy. I'm the principal. And now I'm going to tell you the same thing I told you out in the hall." His
Right.
face was priceless. That was like my
That's hilarious.
my administrative secretary. Um, but again, I could, not even being seen in that role, and even as a director, it's like, who's in
Right.
charge,
But it becomes the narrative that you're constantly pushing against.
right? And so you just have to learn how to not get in your feelings about it. But like in that one case, I had fun with it. So I was
Right.
to, you know,
Whiskey Girl says, I am the manager. Yes, right.
right. You gonna mess with me, I'm gonna mess with you back. And so not always knowing what it is and where it comes from. It comes from a place of fear, ignorance, and just being misinformed. So I don't try to make it about me, because I'm not
Mhm.
trying to give up my power. I work hard to get to a place where I can see where my power is. I can see places I need to work on, and maybe I will, and maybe I won't. But I don't ever want to take someone's power from them or deny them the access and opportunity to find their power. And now that I got, my little bit of power, little bit of joy, I'm not letting anybody take that away.
Mm. Mm. I love that. And that power and joy juxtaposed is important too, right? Like those
Mhm.
pieces. And Whiskey Girl says emotional regulation is a superpower for certain. And a life skill, right? Like it is, it's survival. Um, but so within that also, another one of your superpowers is you have this artistic visionary side to you. I wanna delve into that a little bit because I see your art behind you right now. Tell us about some of these pieces, and yeah, like what role has art played in even just your? Because I think, and I don't think we've ever talked about this, but I was like, what, how does artisticness connect to the way that Troy is an innovator?
Mm,
Because it's in there, and I'm like, what is it? How does it all come together in your mind for you?
right. So, everything starts with a blank canvas. So everything is just blank. There's nothing there. And I will see something, a scene, a point in my life, something I experienced, something that someone else experienced, or something I'm feeling that I want to portray in some kind of way. And so I've always been one, whether it's creating art or thinking about how I'm going to do something, I think about it in my head. I'm on a couple people's dissertation teams, and I was like, once you collect your data, I was like, I had to walk away from my data because I had a pile of data like this.
Mm-hmm.
I had to make it make sense. What's the story I was going to tell? What was I going to pull out? So I had to walk away for a month and a half. It wasn't that I didn't work on it. I was thinking about it. And that's the same way I approach art. So this, portrait is an example of my Sandy Spring Elementary, where my dad was a teacher principal, and it sits up on a hill. It's 3-room school, and those are students going to the building. And the this one is just paying homage to my experience at Morehouse, and everybody has a different book, because one of the things that I did, I was an avid I still am, but in college I read all the time. And James Baldwin, autobiography of Malcolm X, and anything by Toni Morrison or Alice Walker. So that's what that image just kind of demonstrates, just like the brotherhood and knowledge. So my pictures all tell stories. One day I'm gonna put them all together, because I never realized that until I did an art show last summer. I was like, all of these images are about my life, different aspects of my life, and they tell a story. But conceptually, I never thought about them like that. And it's like, this is like my life story in
That's
picture.
like your autobiography right there, right? I
Yeah.
love it.
So I approach, whether it's working on mixed media or whether I'm designing a professional development learning plan for the school district, it kind of follows the same thing. It's like, what are those pieces? What are the shapes I'm going to pull together? How's it going to help people? How's it going to help kids? How's it going to help move us forward?
Well, I love that, and yes, you are always reading, and I must say that I have tried to catch up, but like the number of books, I'm very grateful because being under you as an employee, I definitely in your department have a ton of books. You have always gifted us to help us to continue to learn and grow as well. But in addition, you mentioned it at the beginning, and I want to make sure we come back to it. You actually have your own book that is coming out. You are co-authored a book. Um, the intersectionality and health in education. So, can you tell us a little bit about the book? Tell us what it's about and when it's coming. All the details.
So, a former colleague of mine, Cara Grant, who is in charge, she's the director of physical education and health for Montgomery County. She came to me and was like, I wanted to write a book. And she's like, I thought of you immediately because of your equity background. And would you be interested in co-writing or authoring a book? I'm like, okay. And that's the other thing about me, is like, I'm willing to try anything. It's like, okay, I don't know anything about, the process. I've never written a book before. Okay, but we can do this. And so we collaborated together to really write, pull in different educators, different professionals, to really look at the idea of Black and the intersectionality that we all are. We're not just one thing. I'm Black and male and middle class and educated. So we live in multiple places, but oftentimes we see groups of people, in this case, Black students, as one-dimensional. And so the case studies really examine student experiences through lots of different classrooms and situations, um, and how, it really focuses on how educators can help really see students and affirm them and all of their identities, in ways in which they feel valued and that they can learn at the highest level possible. So it's about 10 case studies. It's going to drop February 2nd. It's on Amazon. So, I want to be on the New York Times bestseller. So everybody go out and get one.
Yes, we'll get one.
But it was really fun to write. So we want to eventually do a part 2. And, so it really kind of like fueled me. It empowered me. So like now okay, I'm an author now. I can do this. So the pain was going through and editing, which actually wasn't as bad as I thought, because I hate the editing process. But it really wasn't that bad.
You've been through it with your doctorate though at this point, so you know it well.
Right. So I was like, I wasn't looking forward to that, but actually that wasn't that bad either. It's like folks did a really good job telling their stories. I have a case in it. Cara has a case. Mine is really talking about my early years as an educator and how I had to really navigate showing up as a Black man in a space predominantly of white women, and some of the challenges that posed, but it helped me again find my power.
I love that. And the power and importance of, I think, the complexity of intersectionality, because it stops us from then creating those monoliths of who individuals are, particularly who are Black students and who are Black families or who are Black staff are, and the complexity of that. I'm so excited. And I love a case study book, because for all my educators out there that are watching, that's how you engage really in some critical thinking, is get a case study. Get a case study, analyze it, have a conversation, dig deep, and understand the layers to authentic experiences to help you learn and know how to do the things you need to change your practice, to change your structures, to actually examine your belief systems, because that'll come out for sure. Whiskey Girl says, "Woo, the challenges in that environment, relatable content. I can't wait to read. I love it. Thank you so much."
Whiskey Girl, we're gonna have to hang out sometime.
Whiskey Girl is amazing. Look, we will go to some of her poetry shows, because I bet you got some poetry in you too, Troy. I know you know stranger to the mic. So yes, for sure. Wow, this has been awesome, Troy. Can you tell us a little bit about just the museum, where everybody can go to find it? And I know we have links below for the book, for the museum, and for the East Coast Racial Equity Group information and website as well. But just some final thoughts on the museum, so everybody knows.
So the Sandy Springs Slave Museum and African Art Gallery is an amazing little privately owned museum. It's 100% volunteer run. And we really have been doing a lot to step it up and add lots of technology and interactive displays to the space to extend the stories that our artifacts tell. One of our next installation will be coming in the next month or so, where we tell the stories of some of the key folks from the Sandy Spring area. One is a gentleman named Canada Jim, who was like Harriet Tubman, led people to freedom to Canada. And in fact, I think he led about 900 people from Canada. And he's from the Sandy Spring area. One of the Edmonston sisters will be represented. So it's like these kiosks that you'll touch, and folks will come to life and tell their stories. And one of them, and it's really cool, the whole process. And one of the characters is my father. And they showed me a little demo of the actors getting dressed up and things. And it took my breath away, because it looked just like him.
Wow.
Not ready. So we're trying to be a place for education, particularly for students. We have a student volunteer board. a youth volunteer board who really helps us, um, tell the stories. We get lots of input from them. And it's just a wonderful place to not only learn about Black history throughout the diaspora, but bringing it back to local history too, and the achievements of these Black folks in Sandy Spring, which I'm a proud descendant of, and the contributions they made to society and the world for that matter. So come out and see us. We're open on weekends from 11 to 5. Well, the last tour starts at 4, so you got to be in the door by 4 because it takes about an hour and a half to get through everything. We also do field trips, church trips, senior centers, families. You just have to contact the museum by emailing or calling us, and we can get those. And you can also set up a tour on our webpage. So it is one of those things like I never in a million years thought I'd get to do. And it's so much fun trying to figure this out. Because like I said, I don't have a museum background, but I will figure something out.
You're getting there though, right? Now
right.
Yeah.
So it's a great place. So please come on out and see us sometime.
And it looks like you've got events going on there too. Because I saw some pictures of events, and I know that there have been quite a few events. You've got some authors that do book signings. I believe actually one of our own friends did. Elena Murray had hers there at the Sandy Springs Laser Museum. So, wow, thank you so much. I know we had a few more comments. I just want to make sure we got everybody in here. All of the people in the chat, Last Man of Men said, in a new world of diversity of which race is broken down deeper in a new social justice era, how do you accommodate to those students that require a more diverse setting and dealing with the parent? What are your thoughts on that?
Let's see. Diversity, where race is broken down deeper. So,
Last Man of Men went deep with us today.
I think it really is, regardless of your experience and knowledge of any particular group of people, we got to start with seeing them as human and seeing their humanity and knowing that at our core, we want the same things. And so I always think that's a good place to start. How we present might look different, but understanding that at the core, parents, families, communities want their kids to be educated and have access to, to college, career, to the community, or whatever is next for them, whatever that is. I don't like to define, but I think it's seeing people's humanity, even if they're where they're coming from rubs you the wrong way. Just trying to center, okay, this is another living, breathing human being, and we may not see eye to eye on this particular issue, but being very clear, this is how I'm going to do, this is how we're going to open our doors up, and setting parameters too. Because you still have to set parameters in some cases, because this is what we're going to do, this is what we're not going to do, and this is what we'll do together.
I love that. And I think what you're elevating, right, is the self-work. Because to do any of the work and to truly make a difference, we got to know ourselves and our triggers, but also what are our belief systems of others to be able to recognize what we need to shift, right? So that's important in recognizing that. All right. Whiskey Roll's got a question too. Do you think Black culture is moving into anti-intellectualism? And if so, how do you combat that wave as an educator? Do you have hope for the TikTok generation?
So I think America is moving into anti-intellectualism. So I won't even just say it's the Black community, because if you look at some of our fellow citizens and the things, the lack of critical thinking that's displayed now, that's what scares me. But I do think
facts.
Right. And I do think, though, that is always, again, historically, we were denied education. we weren't, it was against the law to read. And then when we were able to read, the only thing you could read was the Bible. Uh, and it was a slave Bible that just took out certain passages. So I think there are, um, as a society, I think we have dumbed down a lot of things. And I think the images, we always talk about that, tell, zap our power.
Mm.
I think we talk, when we talk about pain and power, there are lots of folks who define who we are. Again, we're a range of people. you know Being black is a whole lot of things, being whatever is a whole lot of things, and people try to narrow that into one little simple, we talk about multiple identities and intersectionality. They want to narrow it down to, this is who you are. And
Mm.
that's the fight we have to have. I think it's giving kids power to see their capability as that they can be intellectual, because they are, um, but teaching them how to be intellectual in lots of different places and to use it in ways in which, um, kind of propels them rather than zaps their power and the power of the people around them.
That agency. That
Mhm.
agency is so important. And I think everything you just covered, right, is exactly what's wrong with our education system right now, because this is not just the society, right? Society comes out in how we structure our education and our learning systems. And there is that when it's mirrored, we're not really changing anything. we
Right,
gotta we gotta push, we gotta change it, we gotta be critically conscious, we have to recognize and understand how do we dismantle some of the systems that have not been working for our students, have not been elevating that power.
right.
um Man, we could talk for a long time, Troy. Like, we've
I know.
already gone like almost to 120 now. No, I truly appreciate this. I can't wait till part two. When the book comes out, we should bring
All
you
right.
back on, man. We talk a little bit more.
I'm happy to come
And
back.
just an absolute thank you for this, for being on the show. But I have to say, Dr. Boddy, I am so incredibly grateful to the opportunity you gave me to truly transform and change my life and put me on the path that I have been on for the last 7 years, because it has brought me to where I am and where I continue to go, whatever that is. And I am so grateful to have had have your leadership still. But I like really thank you, Troy.
And just on a personal note, it's been nice, as I said in the card, watching you grow, um, being full of self-doubt, and to see you where you are now is like two different people. So keep doing what you're doing. I'm proud of you, and whatever you ever need from me, I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, and thank you to Whiskey Girl for shouting out, for coming in, for supporting, and here for the book chat episode for sure. I love it. Whiskey Girl will be back, right? And I'm gonna have to connect y'all. So thank you again to all of our Ranters fam for showing up, to all of our supporters for showing up. Thank you to my amazing producer, Mr. M, always the man behind the scene, but doing the most. Thank you so much. And to all of you tuning in whenever you are right now to Pain to Power Leading with Love, thank you for joining me. I hope you come back every Sunday at 9 o'clock on Pain to Power Leading with Love on this channel, Brown Girl Interrupting on YouTube, as well as you can watch my episodes. You can see Whiskey Girl, and you can see a lot of our other Ranters Network fam on the iRant Network on the Roku stick. If you have a Roku stick, make sure you go and download the iRant channel. And yeah, Troy, we're on the iRant channel. You can see. So definitely. And I saw John Landsman in here. Got to give a shout out to our friend John Landsman. Thanks. Thank you, John. Thanks, Maria and Dr. Troy. Yes, Dr. Troy, right? Um, It's been an amazing evening. Please make sure that you go and subscribe and follow to the channel. You click the bell, go and follow my blog as well. Check my direct me link out, and go and follow Troy for all of his, go and see his, the East Coast Racial Equity Group information. Make sure you're visiting the Sandy Spring Museum as the holiday time is coming up. People have some breaks. Go and take your children, go and take your families, enjoy and experience this history. I'm so excited for this exhibit to come up because that sounds so amazing. Definitely bringing the kids, coming to see it. And thank you again, Troy.
Thank you.
So appreciative of you. So have a great evening. Peace, love, and light.
Perspectives. And sometimes those perspectives are way on the other end of where you are. But we need to be able to hear and understand this is someone's lived experience. What we need to see is each other, the humanity in one another. I mean, we really need to see each other as people. And while, in our work, we talk about having multiple perspectives, and sometimes those perspectives are way on the other end of where you are. But we need to be able to hear and understand this is someone's lived experience, but also get in the same space where we can hear about one another and learn from each other, because what we'll find is that, we have more in common than anything else. And we'll be able to celebrate our differences in a positive way.
Hi, my name is Maria, but you are soon going to know me as Brown Girl Interrupting. And what I mean by that is that very soon, hopefully, you're going to be following my blog. I am a writer, and I started writing because I was married, I had children, and then my life changed when I separated, and I did a lot of learning and reflecting and growing in that process of change, because change always leads us to that. And I've decided to share that with the rest of the world, because sometimes hearing that someone else is going through the same thing as you, or understanding and putting words to the feelings and experiences we're having, helps us to heal from them, or grow from them, or learn from them. And so that's what my blog is. It's writing about life, healing, relationships, parenting, dating, marriage, pain, love, mistakes, growth, and coming out whole still. My world has slowly crumbled around me countless times, and every time I rebuild with the pieces I've been given to birth something so transformational and beautiful that no one else knew might exist before it was shown to them. These moments tend to coincide within my romantic path. The universe has been telling me to focus on the revolution and not romance. It has over time given me the tools, resilience, and light to turn my pain into power. And only now do I see that the key to this always resided in the love and knowing I had in myself, not from the external sources of family or men. The message I have been avoiding might be that my time in this world I had existed in was not to receive love, but to put it out there for others to see, feel, and heal through. Revolution before romance moves pain into power.